So how often do you need to change a needle on your Singer sewing machine? We're doing all the free video tutorials today on the Singer Elite CE677. But if you have a Singer sewing machine and you have a question on needles, we've got some great tips to help you along. So first off, needles and fabric need to coordinate. And we do have some needle videos in a whole playlist. We'll link below so you can check them out. But I'm going to show you a few things people run into and often have some stumbling block, and then the needle isn't the right needle, or it's not all the way in the machine, or how do I change my needle in the first place? Plus, you do have a needle threader on this machine, and it is key that your needle is in the highest position for this to even work in the first place. So it all works together. You also right now see that the thread is very close to the needle. Do make sure when you are threading the machine that you get your thread behind the last guide at the top of the needle. There is a groove on the front of the needle. Have you ever felt it? You can take your fingernail and kind of go up and down to kind of feel that groove. Your thread actually fits in that groove as it's being pushed down through the fabric. It's kind of protected in that groove. And that's why as you use thicker thread, you need to use a bigger needle. A bigger needle has a bigger groove, so it can protect that thicker thread. So definitely there are things to learn about needles. There's different kinds of needles. There's denim needles, there's ballpoint needles, and we do go through all the different types of needles to help you become a better sewer. So how do we change them? So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and take the thread out of the needle, and you can come right over here and there is a screw on the right side that as you loosen it, and right now this is a brand new machine, I cannot loosen that because it is really tight. So find your screwdriver. It's going to look like this, and you can come in and kind of loosen that screw. And I'm going to tell you a little trick about how tight you want this to be once you start taking your needles in and out. Okay, so loosen it up, and then your needle will drop right down. When you go to put a needle in, there is a flat side on the back. So I always hold it so the flat side, I can kind of feel it back here. And then I put the tip of the needle down in the foot first, and then I'm coming straight up. Now the next thing to do is you need to make sure that it gets high enough. So I need you to kind of take the time to kind of make sure that you can kind of feel that it has reached the highest position. If you kind of put it up, and I could kind of feel that it wanted to resist a little bit, and you tighten it, it's not at the highest position and things are not going to work. So once you're here, you can then tighten it with your fingers, and I would probably recommend, instead of cranking with the screwdriver, once you've gotten it loose from the factory tighten, is to tighten the screw with your fingers. Here's the trick. You need to tighten it enough that the needle doesn't fall out. But if you over tighten it, you're going to eventually break this area in the screw. And we have people do that. They crank so hard that after a while the needle goes up and it can't, it doesn't stay. Needle falls out. So try to find that happy sweet spot where it's tight enough to come in, but it's not going to fall out, and you can probably take your fingers and loosen that for the next time you need to take your needle in and out. So try to use it. This one does have that nice little kind of paddle for a screw, and then that way you can do that tightening usually with these two fingers. If you have trouble tightening this and you're using the screwdriver, we're doing it very gently, just a little bit of tighten, not over tightening, and that will help you there. Next, if you haven't already, you can then cycle through with your needle up, down, and it puts the needle at the highest position. At that point, your needle threader will line up with your hole. Now here's a little trick too. If your needle is not high enough and you bring this down and you're noticing they are, one's, let's say the hole would be low and the needle threader is trying to come in here, you will find that would be a good clue that you didn't get your needle to the highest position. And then you can fix it before you start sewing with that problem. If you are wondering how often to change needles, here is a couple tips. Number one, as you go from fabric to fabric, it's probably a good idea to kind of consider, if you're working on denim today and a lightweight satin tomorrow, you're needing two different needles. So definitely change needles then. If you're sewing along and your thread breaks just in the middle of your seam, that is classic example number one, that it's time for a new needle. If you're sewing along and your thread, instead of it having a nice flat stitch against the fabric, it has a little loop. and then it sews, and then maybe a little loop. That is also a classic example of needing a new needle. If you're breaking your thread, make sure to clean out underneath your throat plate. We have a whole nother video on that. So it's kind of, they go in hand, changing your needle and cleaning out any lint below this area here. If you feel you have bent the needle because you went through something really thick and it kind of got jammed or kind of pushed and held up, it's probably time to change that needle. And also, don't sew over pins. If you hit a pin, you are going to wreck the tip of the needle, and then now you just need a new needle. So I am always very careful. I'll sew up to my pin and then pull it out and then continue on. So make sure that you're not sewing over pins on a regular basis, because that's going to do it too. So if you're unsure how long it's been since you've changed a needle, it's probably time. So get in there. Really the biggest hint is just make sure it gets all the way to the highest position, and also know which needle is right for the fabric you're working on and the thread thickness you have selected for that project. We have a ton of video tutorials that you can check out and start watching from the beginning. All the items that we've talked about are in the description, and you can start watching these videos from the beginning at the link you can find below.